Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second feedback video. Thanks to all of you who have submitted their research questions, and for those of you who have not yet, please do that. As you know, this is compulsory, and only if you submit your coursework, I will be able to assign you a supervisor. So, coming back to your submission, yes, before I forget, I also want to say thank you to all of you who have made comments to their peers. I think they are very useful and they allow the conversation to keep going. You know, the more comments you make, the more feedback you get. So I think it's really worth engaging in this exercise. And again, I think you can learn a lot from each other because most of your work is of very high quality and you can really inspire each other. So maybe a couple of things about the research questions. Again, I think that many research questions are very interesting and very relevant. So keep doing this excellent work. Maybe a couple of things. In certain cases, I have the feeling that you ask too many questions. I mean, actually, it's a very good sign if you have a lot of questions. The risk is that you won't be able to address them all in this very small scale project. So maybe the way to go is to think about, which are the questions that really matter to me, right? Which are the questions that I really would like to address and which ones can be maybe left out. The other issue is that sometimes the questions could be even more explicit or more kind of applied to what you will find on the ground. Some of the questions remain very abstract and vague. I think this is normal at this stage because you are at the very beginning of starting to think this project. But I think with the time, these questions will have to become more precise. Okay? And then the third thing is that these questions will need to have an inner logic. Sometimes you ask very relevant and pertinent questions and good questions, but it's not immediately clear how these questions tie together, are connected, are part of a larger puzzle that you want to build. So you need to think your research questions as pieces of a puzzle that will allow you to get to a bigger picture. Okay? So how do these questions connect? Right? It seems to me that sometimes the questions are pointing to different processes, which, at least for me, is not clear how these processes are connected. Okay, and they need to be connected at least in this kind of small scale project that you're doing for your MA, because you won't have time to go in all directions. Okay, even if that would be interesting. The other thing is that sometimes your questions take things for granted. So questions, for example, like how does gender difference affect language learning processes? Now, I know this is a question that is often asked, but it's important not to take for granted that the gender is actually a category that needs to be taken into account. Or better, in order to say that this is a category that we need to take into account, we need to kind of either investigate that. So what are the factors impacting language learning? Or then refer to literature which says that this is common sense, so we can build on that, right? Other questions are like, okay, how do teachers deal with motivational factors? Yeah, but then this question assumes that actually teachers do deal with motivational factors in language education. We don't know. They may not. So in order, before we can answer that question, we need to be sure that they do deal. So there are a lot of questions like that which have some implicit assumptions, right? We always have implicit assumptions, but we need to make them explicit. Either by anchoring our questions in theory. So, okay, these are the kind of theoretical achievements we made in our subfield. This is what we know, right? So I'm building my questions on what we know. But then that needs to be said explicitly. Or I made some initial observations, and based on these initial observations that I did, because you are all researchers, right? You can ask a specific type of question, but this needs to be there. So for us to understand where you're coming from and where you're going. Okay. So this was were the couple of things that I wanted you to say. Maybe also a final thing is that often the questions are very good. Actually, most of the cases, the questions are very good. But what would be good now at this stage is to really start thinking, are these questions also questions that you can research? And what do you need in order to be able to research these questions? So what kind of data do we need to be able to research this and this? Through what methodology? What data collection techniques do I need to be able to kind of investigate these questions? Okay, so this is important because you may find out that specific questions may be super interesting and may super important, but cannot be researched or cannot be researched in within the limits and constraints that you have. Okay, so that's really very important. I know that some of you are already aware of that, thinking about accessibility, thinking about, you know, all these constraints, but I think that you're at the stage now where you need to start thinking about this. Okay. Okay, so then I'm done with my feedback for today. Please don't forget to complete the last unit, and I'm gonna make everything available from now on, and I'm really looking forward to read and see how your projects evolve. Thank you very much.